first of all, there have been protests, significant protests against the murders of Henry Nowak in England, the attempt of beheading attempt of the gentleman, I forget his name, forgive me, in Belfast. So throughout Ireland, throughout England, and including in Scotland, there have been Glasgow, there have been these protests. So here's I think a typical response from your typical Eurocrat. And this is John Swinney, and he's the First Minister of Scotland. Here's the headline it's from The Scotsman, the newspaper over there. Scotland must stand against racism, hatred, and intimidation. First Minister John Swinney has said Scotland must stand against racism, hatred, and intimidation after protests following a knife attack in Belfast. In a post on social media, Mr. Swinney said, "The scenes we saw in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Ayr last night are unacceptable. Scotland is a welcoming nation, and those who choose to make their lives here are valued members of our community. Racism, hatred, and intimidation have no place in Scotland. We must stand against it."
Don't you? Where did they get? Do they have an AI thing that always turns out this boilerplate? This place has no place here. This isn't who we are. All that stuff.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he just admit that there's no audit of the people coming in to the UK? They come in illegally for the most part. They come from areas that are governed illiberally. They come with religious differences. They have ideas about women and homosexuals, other tribal people, people not of their tribe. They have, very negative views of them. And they won't assimilate or integrate or culturate at a pace that would be expected of any other immigrant. And so they have gotten a message that they're going to be subsidized with housing, education, food, medicine, and the host feels that they feel that the host owes them that. And then when they're deterred from the consequences of their behavior, whether it's a rape gang or walking down the street and hitting somebody, then they go to the next level. They being, that's a collective stereotype generalization. But then this demagogic politician, then he doesn't say anything about this, but he wants to give a soapbox platitude so that he feels good about himself, but he doesn't understand that no one's listened to him anymore. There's an entire European movement that if they don't intervene and say, we expect every single person in the UK to have come legally, and they must reside legally. And if you're an immigrant, you must be self-supporting and fully employed, and you will face the full force of the law just like subjects of the crown. Now, if you can't do that, would you please leave? But they can't say that. And I don't know why they can't say it. How they got in this position where some cities are 20, 30% non-indigenous people, I don't know, but it's not working, and it's going to spread. So the next thing that's going to happen is if they won't address it in a sober and moderate fashion, then you're going to get people frustrated. We saw those two girls, I think they were from Scotland, remember, that were defending themselves from that predator. And
with
everybody,
a knife and a hatchet?
Yeah, and she was trying to protect, is it her sister or her friend?
Sister. Yeah.
Sister, and everybody demonized her and said, oh, this is, and then he was found guilty the other day of actually trying to attack them or solicit them in some fashion. But if you allow rape grooming gangs and you don't do anything about it, then the people are going to get frustrated and do that, and they're going to get violent. And so you have to treat everybody equally under the law, and you have to have the rule of law. That's where we learn the rule of law, from the Western tradition via Britain. And if there's no rule of law, and here in the United States, there was just a poll that said that it was overwhelmingly, it was 70% wanted everybody deported who was here illegally that committed a crime. And I thought, well, that doesn't do any good. Who wouldn't? Then I read down at 56%. 56% of the population want everybody deported who came here illegally.
Right.
How could that be when we're told by the leftist media that all these people that are spitting at ICE and throwing rocks at them and waving plastic phallic symbols. How could that be? Well, the public is tired of that. And they look at the ICE people and they don't see demonic figures. They see largely minority people who want a living and want to protect their communities that are the most impacted from illegal immigration.
Yeah. Look, why is an elitist type, whether you're government or media in England, say, who believe they have the right to say you, lower middle class white dude, are a racist for this and this reason. So they have some racism calibration, but they won't apply it to
They won't because they have
immigrants
this.
who are who have
Because they have
racial.
this Marxist, Foucauldian, Lacan, Derrida, postmodern Frantz Fanon idea that there is a binary. There's no middle. There's a victim and there's a oppressed and there's a victimizer and an oppressor. And the duty of all good Marxists is to, and they have redefined that. Marx didn't talk about race. He talked about class. And they said class doesn't matter. They said class doesn't matter because many, many, many people on their side of the binary are wealthier than the other oppressor sides.
Right.
Barack Obama is much, much, much wealthier than Joe Biden. His children are much better shape than Hunter Biden, you know. And
Yeah.
so, but they are on the oppressed side. Nobody can define it. We don't know what makes a person on the oppressed side, but I guess it's the one Confederate drop, 1/16 of non-white blood or non-Christian faith or whatever they use. And once they went down that road to be racially essential, they have to have something. I mean, even the Native American tribes who went down that side and said nobody can be in charge of this casino unless they have tribal blood. Well, in our society, what does that mean? That means they have to have DNA. And I think it's 1/16 or 1/8. And you can see how absurd this is. It's going
Right.
back to the antebellum South. And that's what they're doing. And you can be very, very wealthy. You can be very privileged. You can have every advantage. And Cory Booker's parents were corporate grandees. He grew up in a very upscale, and we're supposed to think that he is a champion of the oppressed. Jasmine Crockett has two accents, one that reflects her middle-class, upscale private schooling, and the other that she puts on when she wants to be authentically inner city. And it's a joke. The whole thing is a performance joke, performance art. And everybody's tired of it.
Yeah.
And so this guy is going to get up and lecture, but he should ask himself, if you say black today or you say non-white or the other, it's in a positive sense. But if you hear a government bureaucrat or a person in the media or a celebrity and they say white, it's almost always in a negative context. It's a pejorative. And people who are somewhere between 67 and 71%. And by the way, I think it's a ridiculous rubric anyway, because I live in a Hispanic area, and in the summer I am darker than many of my Hispanic friends. So, and I see people at the bank every day who are speaking Spanish and they're pure white. I don't know why we call them non-white, or I don't know why anybody calls anybody white or non-white, but that's another
Right.
story. But the point I'm making is that it's always in a pejorative, and that's not sustainable. People will not put up with that. If they and when you add the deplorables and irredeemables and Peter Strzok, oh man, I smelled them all at Walmart. And the guy at CNN said, I have more teeth than everybody than the Trump rally. And Joe Biden, ultra MAGA, semi-fascist, garbage, chumps. And then clingers, they cling to their guns, they cling to their religion. It's time to quit that because there's a big revolt. And you don't want it to get like it is in Europe. But you keep, when
Yeah.
you have the young Ukrainian woman butchered and this conniver, now he's suing the FBI, DeCarlos Brown. And then you had just recently the young kid walking outside his home in Philadelphia and he was murdered. And you had the woman set on fire in Chicago, these high profile black on white. And then the reaction is, I don't know what the reaction is, but, in the case of Carmelo Anthony, you had counter demonstrations where they basically said that he was the victim and the man he murdered was the oppressor. And, when you have AI imagery of people urinating on Metcalf's supposed grave, I guess it was manufactured by AI, but still the message was hatred. And we got to get this university idea that if you're on the victim side of the binary, you're incapable of racism or oppression. That's just a get out of jail free card. That is just an invitation to be racist. The only thing that keeps us from behaving is some kind of deterrence, whether that's religious or legal or whatever, or social or shame. But you remove some of those deterrents, and you're going to see human nature in the raw with the veneer stripped off.